how to improve your marriage. Today on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of Saint Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Dr. Christine Bacon. She is a Catholic wife and mother, communication and relationship expert, an author, speaker, trainer, longtime university professor, and host of the radio talk show Breakfast with Bacon, here today to talk about her acclaimed book, The Super Couple, a formula for extreme happiness in marriage. You can find it at her website, drchristinebacon.com. Dr. Christine Bacon, welcome to The Simple Truth. And how are you today?
I'm doing really, really well. I love talking about marriage more. Well, I love talking about God most and marriage second of all. So who would want to talk to Jim Havens?
Wonderful. Well, this is a great blessing. I got to say, this is a book that I want to recommend it as highly as possible because, number one, it is so practical, so helpful. I would think for any spouse who reads this to do a better job as we try to fulfill our vocations as half of a marriage, as part of a marriage, right? So I found it to be just incredible in terms of kind of like an examination of conscience as you read through it, but with also very, very helpful tips and truths and all sorts of things, many of which you wouldn't necessarily consider exactly with such clarity or precision as they are presented in. But obviously, this comes as a fruit of a lot of great work that you've done, Dr. Bacon. So maybe we could start there, just sharing sort of the context behind the book, the story behind the book, what led up to it. Why did you have a sense that you needed to write this?
Well, first of all, call me Christine.
Okay.
I always joke that until my student loan is paid off, you can't call me doctor, but just make my joke about that. So I have always been a romantic, and growing up, I just always felt that there was that thing, that there was a place where someone had the marriage that just didn't struggle. And so as I got married at 18, and things that I used to be shy to tell now, because I've said it on the air so many times, it's not like I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with my sins, but I'm able to put forth better because of the truth. Because if anybody judges me, I don't care anymore. I just know that the Lord has forgiven me. And so my truths are, I met my husband at 18. And we fell in love quickly, and I had sex with him after 2 weeks of knowing him. And we got pregnant the first day we had sex. And so here I am pregnant 2 weeks after meeting someone. My husband was a very good man, so he was like, let's get married, let's get married. Praise God, he was a good man. We got married 2.5 months after having met each other. We were parents, obviously 9 months after having met each other. And it was good. Marriage was good in the beginning. And then we had our second child, and very quickly I ended up having an affair after 4 years of marriage. And I tell this to people because, and it's a little bit not in the book, that part's not in the book, but I tell that to people because one of the lies is that if you have an affair, that means you weren't in a happy marriage. And we can talk about that another time if you wish, but that's not true. Really, one of the cases, Satan gets in your path, your boundaries are low, stupid things happen, and you're like, what the heck did I do? How did I fall into this trap? Especially someone like me who is a Catholic, a good Catholic, right? So you're thinking that's one of the reasons people's boundaries are in fact low, is because I'm in love with my husband, I know God, I'm good to go. So you make this mistake. Anyway, we ended up reconciling after 4 years apart, which was, again, praise God for that. We never did divorce. But when I made the decision to reconcile with my husband, reconcile the first time, so our second time together, I remembered saying to myself something that was very important. Never knew how important this statement was. And of course, once I did the research, it started making sense. But I remembered standing in my living room in New Hampshire in that year, 1990. And I said to myself, because my husband was saying, will you please take me back? And I thought to myself, well, Christine, if you got out of this marriage the first time, everybody would have understood you were 18, pregnant, and stupid. But this time you're consciously making a decision. This time, if you go back, it's for good. And that, just on a secular thing, is important because research, especially if you go into the John Gottman Institute, Gottman's the foremost marriage expert. He's got thousands and thousands of studies at the Gottman Institute. He finds the same thing, that the thing that really holds a marriage together is this belief in commitment. Divorce is not an option. So I didn't even understand that at that point. But of course, as a Catholic, as I matured in my faith, you realize how God was saying the two shall be as one. They are one. So you weather the storms. So we got back together, and it wasn't especially easy because we'd never taken the classes. We never went to pre-Cana. We never did the things that you were supposed to do. So I struggled, but I knew I wasn't going to get out of this marriage. So I went to school. I got my bachelor's, master's, PhD, all in marriage communication. My specific degree, my dissertation was humor as a communication strategy in military marriage, which I loved it because I didn't want to study anything about, abuse or negative. I'm a happy, fluffy person. I love optimistic things. So as I studied it, there was one question on my dissertation survey that had absolutely nothing to do with humor. All the rest of them had to do with humor and marriage. And this one simply said, rate your marriage. It was a 7-point scale from extremely unhappy on this end to extremely happy and perfect on this end. It was really a 7-point scale. And I asked everyone who took this survey to rate their marriage. Now, keep in mind that I had been unhappy in my marriage for many, many years. And so you tend to look at things through the lens with which you're seeing your own life. I was stunned, Jim, when the second half is happy, very happy, extremely happy, and perfect. 9 people out of the 644 people who took my survey checked off perfect when rating their marriage. And I was stunned, and I thought to myself, those must be newlyweds still having sex every day. They have no idea what a real marriage is because they wouldn't check off perfect. Who has a perfect marriage? But put them aside. I was more concerned with the next column, which said extremely happy. And if I had to ask you to guess before I move on, what % of marriages would you say are not just happy, not unhappy, are not just very happy, but are extremely happy? Give me a number. What % of marriages do you think?
Oh, maybe 20%.
Oh, you're an optimist. I was like 1 or 2%, right? I'm thinking happy people, maybe a lot of very happy people. 35% of this 644 people checked off that they were extremely happy. And I was stunned because that's more than 1 out of 3. And I sat at my computer and I was crying, literally, Jim. I was crying. I was like, typing up, like, what does that look like? I mean, I just want to know what happy looks like as I'm like typing this thing out. And so I finished my dissertation, I graduated, flipped my tassel, and the Holy Spirit said to me, go find out, because I had to know. If you ever had those things in your life that just press on your gut and you can't make it go away, that was me. I was like, what is that? So anyway, that was the beginning of the book, The Super Couple, because I started interviewing only those couples that checked off either extremely happy or perfect. And I interviewed, I'm always interviewing couples, even informally, but I did about 50 couples formally. And it only took me approximately the first 5 couples. By this time, let me backtrack. I had set out to discover, is super, i.e. extreme happiness, is that accidental, or was there a formula? Because I thought for sure they just got lucky. All these couples, like, you met your 1 in a million, or this concept of what we call a soulmate. I thought you must have found that person. So you got it right, and sucks to be you, everybody else, you chose your 1 in 100. You're stuck with this person. And I thought that's what I would find, but I had prayed that I would find that it wasn't accidental, that there actually was a formula. And it took me literally 5 couples. And I do think that this was the Holy Spirit, because as I sat in their living rooms, I would ask the same questions of every husband and the same questions of every wife, every house I went to. And 100% of the men answered the questions the same way. And 100% of the women answered the questions the same way. And just an aside, when I was teaching this at the university here, I was privileged to teach a class called Communication Between the Sexes and another class called Couples Communication. I forgot the second one, but it was couples communication, basically. And I would require my college students, undergrad, to go and find a super couple, which they said was the hardest part of all. But then they had to interview them asking the same questions I asked. I gave them the questions and they said, Dr. Bacon, you're right. They all answered the same way. So here's what it was. I started asking, and these are the basic questions I want you to know. I said, what makes a super marriage? What do you have that other couples don't have? And 100% of the men said, let me tell you about this woman. Let me tell you what she does. Let me tell you about this, this, and that. And because these people had been married 15, 20, or 40 years, it wasn't contrived when the woman would then respond back, let me tell you about him. Let me tell you what he does well. And so these couples, when it was good, they would start pointing to the other person. And then I followed up with a second question. Do you have time for that question now?
Yeah, go for it real quick.
Okay. So the second, 30 seconds. Second question was, you guys, you know what? Let's wait. If we have a commercial break, let's wait. I'd rather develop that one.
We're going to hit the hard break here, but we're going to be right back with Dr. Christine Bacon. Again, the book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. I want to encourage you right now, get this book. We're going to talk about it, unpack it as much as we can today, but we're not going to be able to get to everything. drchristinebacon.com is where you find it. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Dr. Christine Bacon. We are talking about her book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. You can find it at her website, drchristinebacon.com. And I do want to just let you know the purpose of this book. It states it early on, says to teach you how to become a super couple, to present you the formula, if you will, so that you too can import these strategies into your marriage and check the extremely happy box or even the perfect box, as so many of my super couples do. And again, this is what I love so much about the book is it gives you real metrics, real things to look at and say, look, this is what you need to work on. If you kind of flip this switch and start working on this goal or working on this, these actions, start taking these actions, you really can make a big difference in the level of enjoyment, of happiness in your marriage, as of course everybody would want to have that outcome. So this is what you need to do if you want to put the effort in. She gives you the playbook basically right here, the formula. So awesome. Again, you can get the book at drchristinebacon.com. But before we hit the break, Christine, you were sharing with us the second question on that survey that you were asking people.
Yeah, the second question was the opposite of the first question. I said, okay, so have you guys ever really had any difficulties? I mean, you're super, so you must not have really struggled bad, right? Like normal couples. And come to find out, 100% of those couples had gone through things like bankruptcy, death of a child, or one went through infidelity. They had a mother-in-law that lived with them, had one spouse had a nervous breakdown, a bipolar mother-in-law. So they dealt with some big stuff in the relationships. So the second question I said then were, did you ever have any struggles? And remember the first question I asked, what are the main ingredients? Every single husband or wife pointed to the other. And when I asked what was difficult, what was problematic, they pointed to the self. And this was huge for me. And I know I can't go over a whole book in a segment here. But Jim, the biggest thing I learned was this. The formula for extreme happiness in marriage is done by the acronym SACRED, SACRED. I thought it could be either sacred or scared, but I knew that sacred would sell more books, so I went with that one. So, but the S was selflessness. It was so apparent, so important. If you had nothing else, that will help your marriage get to super. And let's just face it, that is Catholic. That is Jesus. That is saying, when it's good, Love your neighbor. Jim, I know you've been married almost 17 years. So when you have needs and your wife has needs in the marriage as well, right?
Of course.
And you're hoping she meets all of your needs. So in a super marriage, let me go with the bad marriage. In a bad marriage, your marriage will be difficult if you always try to meet your needs and your wife tries to meet her needs. That's what I did for years. Even if it sounded noble, like, why aren't you I'm trying to say it's Catholic. I'm always trying to be careful, but why don't we have sex that often? Why don't you do the house? Why don't you do this? Why don't we spend more time together? So we go back and forth about saying these things that are maritally noble, but ultimately you're still pointing out your void, what I need from you. And if in your marriage, you're focusing on what does your wife need, and you surrender your needs to make sure you meet her needs first, that frees up her energy to meet your needs second. So both of you are getting your needs met. It's just like she's getting her needs met by you. You're getting your needs met by her. And then they come together. And that's really why I did the cover of the book the way that it is, with these two hands holding, saying you will get your needs met, but it's really, really risky. You are so vulnerable if you just let go all your needs and go, I'm going to just go after pleasing her needs. Because what if you please your wife and go after all her needs, but she's very selfish and she doesn't meet your needs? Well, then it's upside down. And, therein lies the problem. But if both of you are seeking to please the other first, it's tremendous what it'll do. So I'll stop there and see if you want to ask me any questions before I go into any other part of the formula.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, there's so much. I would say that first, just to let people know, I guess the parts of this book, what you were explaining there is really unpacked in part 4 of the book, what I saw, the super couple formula, where you go through that acronym SACRED and you start with selflessness. But really a lot of that is set up in the chapter right before part 3, what I did not hear, where you define love, you explain romantic love as a feeling versus love as an action. Also, the 2 different forms of happiness. Very helpful stuff. And in part 1, you get all these faulty assumptions out of the way, which really helps to kind of clear one's mind and make sure that any of these faulty assumptions that you're holding can be exposed and can be rejected for the faulty assumptions that they are. And then you get into these basic things. What I heard in interviews, just some basic things. I guess if I can start there, this is one that really jumped out to me big, where you say here in the book, very simply, you say, in terms of our marriages, respect is possibly the number 1 quality leading to super. Grow in respect, and the rest will return. And this is kind of like the first thing, it seems like, that everything grows on. I mean, you can't be selfless if you're not respecting the other. Can you speak about sort of this growing in respect, how important that is?
It is funny because I read a book years ago that you may have heard of called Love and Respect. It was done by Emerson Eggerichs, and he talks about the love and respect cycle, that women want love and respect, but if they have to pick between the 2, they need love to breathe. And if a man has to pick between the 2, he needs respect. So I looked up respect. What is the definition? I'm a real definition person. So it was this belief in the esteem or value of another person. And I know that when we go through our difficulties in our relationship, so when I first married my husband, when I first met him, when you first met your wife, we esteem them so greatly. You're like, oh my gosh, you're the best. I've never met a man as awesome as you. That's why I'm going to marry you. I have to get you. And same with you and your wife. It's just normal. I've dated women, but you're the best woman I've ever met. So we esteem who a person is. We esteem their opinions. We esteem their value. But as we live with someone and we watch we have to clean their dirty underwear and we see their toothpaste on the mirror and you start seeing each other's flaws, we can easily lose respect for that person if we're not careful. And then really, I just turned 60 years old, and I have been alive to watch a lot of politicians. And I look at how our society used to respect or esteem others. You look at Democrats versus Republicans, they didn't have to agree with policies, but they never demeaned each other like they've done in the past 10 or 15 years. And so our marriages tend to follow the same societal pattern, and we start talking poorly about the other. Or, if your spouse is always making has opinions that you don't agree with, or you agree with one political side and your spouse agrees with the other, or you're one religion and your spouse is another. And sometimes if we allow it mentally, we can just think, and it's this repulsion, this like, ugh, I don't even like your opinions. How can you even be thinking like that? And then we cross the line from thinking, I don't respect your opinions, to I don't respect you as a person. You're just a yucky person. You're not smart. You're not talented. And that will destroy a marriage, just like you say, I don't love you anymore. Equally as damaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, let's go to, there's, again, so much, it's hard to pick one, but this is very important. You get into the science as well in various aspects. So important, the differences between men and women. You talk about the need to understand how men and women communicate differently, but you also talk about this this love cocktail that sort of that happens. I think these 11 ingredients that are taking place physiologically when you're first meeting someone, and you're becoming the center of their world. It kind of sparks all of this. Can you speak to that some?
That is one of my favorite places to speak on, because the love cocktail I will often call the lust cocktail, because it actually makes your brain, if we can joke it just makes you unbalanced. And, I'll tell people, hey, you're not psychologically stable right now. You're not seeing the world clearly. And they're like, my boyfriend, my girlfriend is just perfect. Well, you've got this elevation of 11 hormones, as you pointed out. You've got serotonin, dopamine, you got the vasopressin, which is known as the monogamy hormone. So I don't need to tell you which hormone does what, but one hormone will make you just risk averse, or you just a risk taking. So you think of when the love cocktail is elevated in a young teenager who doesn't know how to control him or herself yet. That's why they get into the backseat of that car more often, like, oh, we won't get pregnant. So your risk-taking hormones are low. You have the hormones that make you soft and tender. You have oxytocin. Your testosterone increases. Oxytocin makes you soft to the touch, makes you want to be touched. So this is where the reproduction of the species. I want you to touch me. And this is intimately emotionally as well. But physically, my body is preparing itself for you. But the one that gets me a lot is the vasopressin. Vasopressin is the monogamy hormone. And vasopressin, when it's touched with testosterone, which means it's even higher in the male than in the female, makes you hyper fixated on the object of your attraction. So when you first fall in love with your wife, when I first fell in love with my husband, because of the vasopressin, it actually shuts out the brain's memory of ever having any feelings like this before. It makes the brain say, I have never felt this way for anyone before. And then because you're hyperfixated, again, you go after that person, you make yourself available to that person. And it's really one of the wonderful things that God gave men specifically to pursue his potential wife. And it's a beautiful thing when you're falling in love, but it doesn't stay that way forever, because if it did, once you've gotten married and you're procreating and you want the species to go, what you do on your honeymoon, you would do that all day, every day. Because remember, the brain now is elevated in these hormones. It's so elevated that you're like, you know what, I'll skip work today. And maybe a lot of your viewers were that way. When you fell in love, you took a day off that you never would have taken off before, or this person is the one you want to be with. So if that hormone never wore off, those hormones, we would constantly be focused on that person. And I love talking about this on Catholic shows, because in terms of our faith, Jim, God has given each of us a mission. And if we stay focused on our husband or our wife forever, they are the object of our attraction, we would never fulfill our mission, because that's there, you're here, and I just want to be with you. So many people say, why does it have to wear off? I said that. Why does it have to wear off? But I understand that was God's way of saying, I wanted you to have that wonderful feeling, that song of songs, to fall in love in the beginning of your relationship. But then when that wears off and logic kicks in, your hormones are balanced, now you have to make a decision. Do I logically want to stay with this person for the rest of my life? That's when we start using love is an action, love is a choice. That's what's going to keep you together for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to talk about that some when we get back. There's this great truth that gets repeated over and over in the book. Actions beget feelings. Actions are what will bring the feelings. Actions first, and then the feelings will come. So we're going to talk about that, but a bunch of other things. But if you want to get a phone call in here to Dr. Christine Bacon on marriage today, now's your chance. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Dr. Christine Bacon. Again, I want to highly recommend her book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. I can pretty much guarantee you, anyone who is married, if you read this book, you're going to pick up some helpful things that are going to improve your marriage. Absolutely. I'm sure maybe you've already heard some tips here. If you're listening to the show, this is going to be expounded if you read the book. Again, you can get the book at her website, drchristinebacon.com. And Christine, so you say, I love how you also are making it clear, look, you got to put in the effort. You say super requires daily effort. Effort creates the soulmates. And couples are deliberate. These super couples are deliberate in keeping their spouses at the center of their lives. And at the same time, so I want to bring in, I guess, the question that our young producer in the studio was asking during the break, because it is the question I think most young people would ask when they're not married and they're maybe discerning marriage and they're excited about marriage. It's such an exciting time as you do find that one that you're thinking, hey, I think this is the person I'm supposed to spend my life with, and you're getting ready for marriage, and all of that is so exciting. And as you're talking about, this love cocktail is sort of taking place in your physiology, all of that, and yet there's always going to be some voices at the same time that are going to want to tamper that down. Some, I think, well-intended, some maybe for other motivations, but they'll want to say something like, no, just wait, you don't know anything yet, or something along those lines. But I guess the thought of the young person is, can't this last forever? Can't we do it differently? Can't we be the ones that are going to do it where we can keep it going? And so what would you say to that? That's obviously what we want, but what's the practical wisdom to give young people about this is good to be excited about marriage, and not to be, just wait until it's all going to go away. What is the way to keep it going?
That's such a good question. Thank you, producer, who's young and you're in love. So the hormones have to come down, but that doesn't mean the love does. It doesn't mean you have to have a bad marriage like mine was in the beginning. Doesn't mean you have to go from love to hate. It does mean that when the hormones wear off, you look at that person, you consciously think, okay, why did I fall in love with you? You're smart, you're beautiful, you're going to be a good mom or a good dad. And one of the things, especially in this society, that we stop doing, and this is one I'm very ashamed of, is we stop being kind to each other. There was one couple I interviewed, Chuck and Brooke, and I said something about hurting their spouse's feelings. And I remember Brooke said, why would I ever want to hurt Chuck's feelings? And I was convicted, because I didn't ever think about it. If I hurt my husband's feelings, whatever. And if he hurt mine, whatever. We were so selfish and mean in a sense. We didn't know we were mean. But if we said something hurtful, I didn't even think twice about it. And here's this woman saying, why would I want to hurt him? So when that cocktail wears off, the difference is, when I said before the commercial break, is, logic has to kick in, is I would say to you, constantly work to be kind and hold your tongue. We tend to think, well, you're my spouse, I can say what I'm thinking. Well, really? Would you do that to a stranger? If you're in an office and you're trying to sell a product to someone, would you say to them, your breath stinks? No, you want to sell that product, so you're not going to let them know their breath stinks. You might offer them gum or something, but we tend to be hurtful or careless towards our spouse, like, babe, your breath, it stinks, instead of saying, you might want to have some gum. So it's these ways of, if you can continue kindnesses towards each other and you hold captive your thoughts of your spouse and you continue to see them, but now it's a choice, as the beautiful person that God brought into your life, then you never have to go into this phase of, why am I with you? There will be times where, because life is life and darkness comes, where you're going to be faced with the death of a child or a bankruptcy or someone's disease. And it's that choice to say, I am going to love you, even though I am cleaning up your spit, even though I am having to lift you out of bed, even though you're in terrible depression and grief because of the death of our child, even though you've had cervical cancer and had your cervix sewed together like one of my clients and they could never have sex again. I mean, these are real life things where love is this choice. How can I be like Christ was to this person? And trust me, if you work through some of those things, the feelings, like with my husband and me, are so much more powerful, because it's like, this is the real love. This is like, wow, you're a good man because you're still with me. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And again, that theme in the book about the actions came first and the feelings followed, that's just such an important truth to have in mind, that, again, maybe it just hasn't ever been clearly stated to you in that way. And then to think about it and say, okay, it's not I have to feel this way and then I'm going to act kind to my spouse. It's that I'm going to act kind to my spouse, and there will be good feelings that follow from doing that. There's good fruits to that. So yeah, anything else you want to say, I guess, about the actions and the feelings?
I actually had a guest on my podcast today, and she's a woman in her 80s, and she was married before she was widowed many, many years. And she said, you can fall out of hate just like you can fall out of love. So many people talk about falling out of love. And of course, they're not all saying that they hate their spouse. But when you fall out of love and you just have these non-feelings, or in some cases where you went through infidelity or something difficult and you're like, I do hate you. The power of knowing I can change those feelings too, and I can fall into love. Our society would tell us, oh, once you fall out of it, it's gone. But the example I used in the book is, if I'm constantly running in front of you and I'm opening your door, or I'm buying you flowers, or, my husband's working on the car and I bring him out his favorite drink, those kinds of actions produce good feelings for him, for me. But if I walked up to you and I slapped you across the face, that would produce a negative feeling. And so that's why it's so important to pay attention to, what actions am I committing to you? So when Danny and I were working on getting our marriage back to a good place, we couldn't speak to each other the way that we did before. Even though I'm the one that had the affair, my husband wasn't exactly winning any marriage points, and he knows I'm allowed. I have his permission to say that. He was mean to me sometimes because of the hurt that I caused him. And he would say mean things, and then I would say mean things back. But when we both looked at each other and said, look, we're stuck in this marriage till the day we die. We need to make this good. So he would start being very kind and thoughtful with his words and with his actions, even when he was having a bad day and didn't feel like it. And it caused me to feel more loved, which caused me to want to love him better. And there is a chapter in the book there where we talk about the oxytocin testosterone cycle, which I don't know if I have time to talk about, but
sure, go for it.
Okay, well, physiologically, God gave men a boost. I think a lot of women today in this feminist overrun society don't want to accept this idea that the husband is the head of the house. I mean, I'm 60, I grew up in the 80s. I was told you can do anything, right? So this idea that Danny would be the head of me when society says, don't you let anyone be the head of you. You're equals, which of course we're equals, but even in a corporation, someone's got to make the final decision. You got to go to the CEO. So you have God said to men, I will make you the head of the household, but then you have much to sacrifice. And the beautiful thing is this oxytocin testosterone cycle that I wasn't aware of. And I used to loathe the comments that said, or that phrase that said, happy wife, happy life. It makes us sound like a bunch of prima donnas. Like, well, what about happy husband, happy life? Well, that's not the case. So happy wife, happy life is actually true physiologically. So if the husband goes out of his way to do something to please his wife, right? There's a very small sliver of responsibility for the wife, but it's huge. And her responsibility is to show appreciation. So let me give you an example of the cycle when it's not done properly and then when it's done properly. So my husband goes out of his way to install some French doors in the house before he deploys. And then he goes and deploys for 6 or 7 months and come back, and then I just go about doing my business. I never mention them. I never say thank you. Or he's like, well, install those French doors. And I'll say, well, you had to. You knew you had to get them done anyway. I couldn't do it, or I had to pay somebody. So what he did was taken for granted, and I did nothing. I not only didn't please him or make a nice response, I took the good thing he did and I kind of bashed it. I disregarded it. And then that's going to cause a man's testosterone actually drops. Your testosterone is your happy hormone. It's the one that gives you great energy. For a woman, it's oxytocin. So this man wants to do things for his wife because all you guys want to do is please us, right? A guy's like, dude, I just want to make my wife happy. If she's happy, score, I am good caveman. Made wife happy. Well, that is true physiologically, because here's the thing. If you install those French doors for your wife and then she says, thank you so much, that meant so much to me, the man then feels like he's appreciated. His testosterone increases. He's got more energy, so he can do more of the things on her honey-do list. So all a woman has to do is let her husband know how much she's appreciated. But here's the thing, Jim. That cycle does not go the other way around. If a wife goes, I'm going to go out of my way to please my husband. I'm going to take his truck to the car wash. I'm going to. Now, will my husband appreciate that? Absolutely. But will it make my oxytocin, which is my female happy hormone, go up? No, it doesn't. So it is as if God's saying women are wired to try to please and love their husbands. So when you do it, you know, it's expected. It's kind of what you do naturally. It doesn't take extra work for you women per se. I know that you'll probably have people with questions I can answer specifically based on their questions. But for a man, you go out of your way to surrender your needs, your time, your schedule. You do something for her. And if she shows appreciation, I'm going to gift you. I, the Lord your God, I'm going to gift you with this energy so that you can continue to serve your wife, serve your family. And that's why you're the head of the household. It just made such great sense to me that God would gift a couple that way. Husbands, serve your wives, please her, and here's the gift you will get. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's so good. And as you talk about this, the vision being really one of serving one another, this selflessness, and that, oftentimes cycles need to be broken to get there. And that people often ask you the question, well, who should go first, right? And your answer is you should, right? Whoever, right? Everybody, either one, you need to go first. And so this is just something you need to start cultivating. Each person is responsible. Each person has to take ownership and start loving in this way. But again, you practically lay it out so well in the book. Again, highly want to recommend it. The Super Couple is the name of the book, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. You can get it at her website, drchristinebacon.com. Do want to give you one last chance. If you do want to get a call in today, any question, right now is the time to ask it. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. 511-5483. And, it might be my last opportunity to ask a question, because if we don't get a caller, I'm just going to open it up in the final segment and give you the floor, because what is most important to share with people here today. But I want to make sure to get this in, and that is, you first came to my attention when we were doing an interview. I was interviewing somebody from Catholics for Marriage Restoration. They were having you as one of the speakers for their retreat. People can learn more at CatholicsForMarriageRestoration.com. And this is a group that assists those, this is their mission statement, assists those who are unjustly abandoned or reluctantly separated from their spouse while they remain faithful to their marriage and hope for reconciliation. You've got a piece right at the end of this book, some final truths, where you write about standing for marriage. Anything else that you want to say about that today?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So the Catholics for Marriage Restoration is actually a subset of the standards group that I have. So because of that acronym SACRED, SACRED, I have founded a group called Sacred Standards. And these are parents who are people who are standing for marital reconciliation while their spouse is cheating on them, divorcing them, annulling them. And these are people who say, no matter what happens, you are my spouse until the day one of us dies, and I am going to stand on my vows. So I'd love to tell you about how people can join that group. We have parent standards. We have children's standards. You can stand for the marriage of a friend if you want, but it's an amazing group. I'm a Catholic, but the group is for Protestants and Catholics as well, and I do not shy away from my Catholic views. But I'd love to tell you more about that after the commercial break.
Great, good. And is there, do they just go to your website for that, or is there a separate website?
They can contact me at my breakfastwithbacon.com website, but it's actually sacredstandards.com as well as the specific website just for that. But let's not confuse them.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Dr. Christine Bacon, talking about her book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. You can get it at drchristinebacon.com. That's drchristinebacon.com. All right, final segment here. Down the stretch we come. The floor is wide open, Christine. So anything you want to share with us in this final segment, go for it.
Okay, and just to make it easier for those of you that are driving and listening, you can also go to Amazon.com and get the book as well. So, and you can get audio. We're struggling a little bit with the Kindle copy. There's been a problem lately, but you can get the hard copies and the audio that way. Before the commercial break, I was telling you about my sacred standards. So what happened is my marriage got really, really good. And then my daughter's marriage fell apart. And, Satan was kind of like, well, I couldn't get them, so let me move on to her daughter. And the Lord caused me to start being a stander. He taught me spiritual warfare. And he said, you've learned all you need to know about marriage. Well, not all you need to know, but I've taught you enough. And so he brought me to this next phase and standards. So I had 4 people whose spouses had left them, who were having affairs and whatever, get together and meet with me one day. The Holy Spirit said, have them together in your house. I'm like, why would they want to meet in my house? Why would they want to talk about this most painful thing in their lives? But it was like a support group. So long story short, those 4 people met in my living room and they wanted to meet again. So it became a monthly meeting that grew to about 25 people, with people conference calling in from other states. And then COVID happened and we went to Zoom, and the Lord has exploded Sacred Standards up to over 400 people in every state in 10 countries. And we have a monthly meeting where people come together, and the details might be different, but what we've learned is, Satan, his strategies are always the same because he can't create. He can only copy. So one of the gifts that the Lord has allowed me, praise God, that, he uses humble o me, is I will teach people, okay, yes, your spouse is going to say this, they're going to do that, and here's how to respond. There is a page on my website called I Am a Stander, and it's got the 25 rules of standing. Everything has a biblical verse right next to it where you can find it in the Bible. The first one, for instance, never respond to hatred and anger with hatred and anger. And I help people apply that when they're dealing with a certain situation. My spouse is saying they're not going to give me back the kids, and they're never going to let me see them, and so on and so forth. So how do you respond to those things? Other rules of standing are always pray for your spouse. Another rule, always pray for the other woman or the other man. Always forgive, and so on and so forth. So These standards are some of the greatest human beings I have ever met, because we live in a society where marriage is cast aside, and we are told, well, as soon as you divorce your person, your marriage is dissolved. Well, that's not true in God's world. It's not true in God's Catholic Church, in the church at all. And the Catholic Church is the only church remaining that teaches the truth of marriage, that it is indissoluble. So even if your spouse divorces you, that divorce is only valid in human courts. It's not valid in God's courts. And so you're still married to that person until the day you die, unless, of course, an annulment came and says that the marriage never existed in the first place, but whatever. So these people face a lot of persecution, a lot of judgment. But one of the things I love doing is standing alongside these people and telling them, you're not delusional, you're not ridiculous. And so there's this huge community of people that God has put together. And the formula in the super couple actually touches right on top of what these standards do, the sacred formula. I'll give it to you real quick. S is for selflessness. A is attentiveness. If you pay attention to what people are doing well and not what they're doing poorly, it's going to help your marriage. And think, while I'm saying this, how this can help you in your marriage. Any of you listening, or for those of you that are in a divorce or in a breakup situation, how can you pay attention to what your spouse is doing well and not poorly? The C is communication. Jim already touched on that. Communication is huge. How we say, what we say, and in the book I do talk about differences between the male and the female brain, gender communication differences. It's awesome. I love talking about that stuff. How are men going to approach a situation versus how are women typically going to approach a situation? The R is respect. The E is encouragement, which is really crazy. That's the one that took me the longest to figure out when I was interviewing these couples, because I was looking at them, and one of the questions that was in my brain, and it ended up being in the faulty assumption pages, I used to think a pessimist can't possibly be married to an optimist, because my husband's a pessimist, I'm an optimist, and that was always such a hard part in our marriage. So that's what I thought. But as I interviewed these couples, I found out that actually nearly 100% of them were an optimist married to a pessimist. And I was like, what am I looking at? What is causing me to think that? And as I heard them speaking, I thought, oh, wait a minute. It's not optimism, pessimism I'm looking at. It's encouragement, discouragement. Super couples are super encouraging of one another. If anybody could write a book, Christine, you could write a book. If anybody could run that marathon, Jim, you could run that marathon. And so super couples believe in the other. And if your spouse believes in you, you're going to be more inclined to go, okay, I can do this. If anybody could run for mayor of Buffalo, New York, you can do it, Mike. I know you can do it, right? So you just do this because you've got someone believing in you. And guess what? That's biblical. It talks in the Bible all the time about encourage one another. Well, I never realized that was a spouse's responsibility. And my super couples were incredibly encouraging of one another. But imagine if your spouse has divorced you or left you or is trying to divorce you, and you're being encouraging of them. They don't know how to handle that, because remember, they're running from you. They want to think that you're evil and they hate you, but you're being loving and you're being encouraging, and the world would say, why are you being nice to them? They're being a jerk to you, but you're acting Christ-like to them. They scratch their heads, but that's love, and love is extremely attractive. It's the most attractive force on earth, because guess what? God is love. That just never fails. So the last part in the formula, the D, is deliberateness. I asked my super couples, I said, so did you guys, you just wake up loving each other? You just wake up? And one of them said to me once, Christine, no, we're just as human as anybody else is. We fail too. But I remember one super wife saying to me, this is my only spouse. I only ever want to have this spouse. And I need to wake up each morning and make a decision. If I want to be happy, I have to deliberately choose to do things to please him or her. So I remember, again, I still struggle. Every now and then I'll go to run to the car on Sunday mornings, and I know my husband, who's in the shower, still wants a cup of coffee. And the lazy Christine runs to the car, but the super couple Christine is like, go make him his coffee first. It's these little things that are deliberate. But the good thing is, to answer the producer's question from earlier, it's like, oh, does that have to go away? Here's what happens. When you deliberately start loving your spouse, it's hard at first because it's unnatural, but it becomes habitual. And so I start putting your needs first, and I start making your cup of coffee and ironing your clothes or filling up your tank of gas, because I know you hate filling up the tank of gas, especially when it's raining. You start feeling that, and it produces these loving feelings, because as Jim, you said, loving actions produce loving feelings. And it just comes back in a more mature, a richer way. And I just want to tell everybody out there, fight your backsides off for your marriage. Fight. I'm gonna pull a Trump. Fight, fight, fight. Don't give up on your marriage. Don't give up on your kids. Your kids want you to stay married till the day you die. Society is wrong when they say, there's some lying statistics out there which people just start mimicking, even though there's no study that says this. It says children would rather have you two happy. Yes, but if you can't be happy together, a child's second choice would rather be for mom and dad to be divorced and happy than to be together and fighting. That's a lie. Kids want parents in the same house because they're the most selfish age they're ever going to be. They want you in the house, even if you're, of course, they don't want you beating each other. But if you're just fighting, they'd rather have you in the house, because that says to your children, your mom was worth us fighting for. Your dad was worth us fighting for. You kids are worth us fighting for this marriage. And this is what a real marriage is. And you guys can make it happen too. When you're older and you get married, you're going to have a super marriage.
Yes, yeah. One of the beautiful things right here at the end of part 3 in the book, you said, the more I focused on his needs, the happier I was. Wow, I began to see that super wasn't impossible for us after all, and my positive attitude toward my marriage began to materialize for the very first time in decades. I don't know if I can sufficiently communicate the deep emotional happiness this newfound awareness brought my soul after decades of believing I'd never be happy with this man and would be relegated to a marriage of toleration. My heart began to burst and I was humbled. Thank you, Jesus. We really could one day attain super if we tried hard enough, or should I say, if we loved frequently enough. There is hope. Keep going. Thank you, Dr. Christine Bacon. You can get her book, The Super Couple, wherever you find books, or drchristinebacon.com. God bless you all.